Hi there, I'm Dr. John White, WebMD's Chief Medical Officer, and host of the Spotlight On series from our Health Discovered podcast. In this special episode brought to you by UCB, you'll hear why the color of your skin might impact how you're diagnosed and treated for psoriasis.
That letter wasn't about killing myself, but more so like a spiritual death, like killing the different parts of me that would not allow myself to truly live an authentic life because of psoriasis. And so it was so many people touched by the blog that they had sent it to the National Psoriasis Foundation. So a couple of the employees there at the time had messaged me and they were like, oh my gosh, we love your letter. We want you to come to a volunteer conference. And so that very next year, I was at my first National Psoriasis Foundation conference.
Listen to Health Discovered on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, this is Michael Uslan. You're listening to Batman on Film.
The Adventures of Batman. Welcoming you to the new adventures of Batman.
I don't believe it. Who are you? Who are you? I'm Batman of Earth. I've been stranded here.
Then welcome to the planet Zur-Anar. Here, I'm Batman.
Given the infinite possibilities in an infinite universe, it's logical two Batmen would come to exist on two separate planets.
Welcome to episode 2 of Batmanimation, a Batman on Film podcast, revisiting the animated adventures of the Caped Crusader. I'm newly minted senior contributor Javi Trujillo, and joining me is the founder of BOF, the contradictor of clickbait himself, Bill Jett Ramey. So, Bill, thanks for taking time away from managing stately BOF Ranch to talk some Batman with me this morning.
Oh yeah,
how are you? How are you, sir?
I'm good. I like that one. I am the. I don't like bullshit and clickbait. So yeah, that was a good one.
So how's I know you like to kick off with a little bit of whimsy, a little bit of witty banner. How's the weather like in your neck of the woods today?
Oh, you got weather. How did you know I like talking about weather? Well, I am not going to, it's going to be in the 90s today. And I'm not going to complain because, I mean, June, July, and then into August, it was freaking 100, over 100. I'm talking 110. Yeah. I'm not talking 101. And then you add on the heat index. It was and no rain. So we've been getting rain. My yard is coming back, which good. I thought it was gone. And, but for the last couple of weeks, it's been mainly in the 80s for the highs and low 70s. So I feel like the fall is trying to get here. It's trying to get here, and I'm ready for it to arrive.
Yeah, today's supposed to be our last day of like, this is 98. Then we drop into like 96, and then we're like low 90s going into the 80s starting in September. So thank God, because it's been miserable.
If you're listening, both of us are in Texas. I'm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. He's down in Austin. So it's about a 4-hour difference, if driving difference that is. So he's a little further south and more south and central Texas, where I'm in North Texas. So the weather is similar, but there are some differences.
Yeah.
Texas is a big state. Javi, did you not know that?
I've heard, and I've also attempted to drive out of here, and it takes forever.
I have never been west of Austin, San Antonio, Fort Worth. You could draw a line from Austin,
Really?
Fort Worth. Yes, I have
You
been.
never made like the drive to El Paso?
I've never been west, and my daughter lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So
Okay.
I am going to drive from Dallas to Albuquerque here, probably in the spring, and I will drive through parts of Texas I've never seen with my own eyes before. Never been to the Panhandle. Never been to West Texas. I have been. Okay, I've been as far south as like Corpus. So
okay, yeah, I've been there.
Not like Brownsville, not that far down in the valley, but yeah. So there's a good chunk of Texas I haven't seen, but I've seen all of East Texas. You know, from Austin to San Antonio to Corpus to Beaumont, Port Arthur to Groves, where I grew up, same area, all the way up to Nacogdoches to Marshall and Longview over to Dallas. I've seen all of East Texas, North and Central and East Texas, but yeah.
Yeah, I think from here, when we go travel out west, we've got to gas up at least once before we finally get out of Texas. That's how far it is to get out of here.
El Paso, where I grew up, Groves, Texas, which is Beaumont, Port Arthur area, right? I mean, south, almost the far southeast Texas you can go, right near the Louisiana border. And so Orange is actually, well, the whole area. So Orange is right on the border, but so that area is closer, or El Paso is closer to Los Angeles, California, than it is to the Beaumont, Port Arthur, Orange area of Texas.
I believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's some geography and some Texas talk for y'all who are listening. So
So turning it back to the show proper, I don't think I know the answer to this question. Who's your favorite voice actor for Batman? What's your favorite Bat voice?
For
those
nostalgia,
the wheels are turning.
For nostalgia, probably Olin Soil. I'm pronouncing his name correctly.
Or am I thinking of a different actor?
Olin,
might be, yeah.
Soule, Soul. This is my accent overtaking pronunciation. But the guy who did Batman for most of the Super Friends, for the first animated Batman series back in the late 60s, and voice Scooby-Doo, or those old Scooby-Doo mysteries. That's probably because of my childhood. Are we counting just from television, the TV series?
Just any animated Batman. It could be one of the movies, because there have been a plethora of those.
Yeah, I'll stay. I'm not gonna touch them because there have been so many, but I mean, you know what? Probably, and this is fitting for this show, probably Diedrich Bader. As the thing is, people are shocked that Batman the Brave and the Bold is my favorite animated Batman series, and it's not Batman the Animated Series because well, for one thing, it's the whole premise is like everything I it's not my cup of tea when it comes to comic books or live action film. Batman team ups and Batman in space and just crazy Silver Age Batman stuff. But I have such a appreciation for it's a love letter to Batman history, and it's fun. I love it. I didn't think I was going to like it, and I ended up loving it. It ends up being my favorite animated series, and because Batman the animated series, which I love it. My Batman sensibilities were already formed when that came out in '92. It didn't have a there's a lot of I won't say kids, but people in their 30s and 40s who grew up on that, and that's why they became a Batman fan. And so it has and I get it, it has such a special place in their Batman fan heart, and I totally get it. It made him a Batman fan. It's like the '60s series for me made me a Batman fan. But so my my sensibilities when it came to Batman by 92 were just already in damn near in, concrete. But I just love the Batman the animated. I mean, I love Brave and the Bold because of it's just such a like I said, it's a love letter to Batman and Batman history.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned the Brave and the Bold because for today's episode, we will be discussing the Brave and the Bold, Season 2, Episode 9, The Super Batman of Planet X, which originally aired on March 26th of, I wrote in 2020. I think it was 2010. But the synopsis for this is Batman and the Metal Men fight Kanjar Ro, who is a 50s era JLA or 60s era JLA villain. Later, Batman goes to the planet Zur-En-Arrh, where he meets another Batman and develops superpowers.
Yes,
and that is the synopsis from IMDb. But this episode is based on Batman 113, which was published in February '58. That issue was written by France Herron, penciled by Dick Sprang, and inked by Charles Paris. Now, I was not familiar with France Herron. Like, that's not a name that comes up a lot in Batman lore. And to me, France Herron, it sounded kind of like maybe it was someone's pen name or something. So I did a little light digging.
Okay.
He's a real, that's his name. He co-created Firefly, Clock King. For Marvel, he co-created the Red Skull, which I'd never heard about. And most importantly, he co-created Captain Marvel Jr.
Really?
Which, I thought that was really interesting.
With CC Beck, I'm sure then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was tied in with that. So that right there, I mean, Captain Marvel Jr. goes to Elvis.
Yeah, I was about to say, you're trying to get me on an Elvis tangent, aren't you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you haven't seen the movie, I mean, Elvis is reading Captain Marvel Jr. comics in the latest biopic.
And Elvis was an OG comic book fanboy, and Captain Marvel Jr. was his favorite comic book superhero. That is legit. That's not something that was put into the movie. I mean, look at his look at the costumes from the 70s. Yeah. So we have France Herron to thank for Elvis's comic love and for Zur-En-Arrh. Awesome.
And another comic note before we get into the episode, Zur-En-Arrh as a concept was reimagined by Grant Morrison when he started his run in Batman 655, with Batman donning the costume and identity of the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh fully in Batman 678, which was July 2nd of 2008. So roughly a year and a half, 2 years before this episode even aired. So in terms of like Batman history, this is fresh if you're reading the comics. If you think of the production time from voicing and animating, it's fairly hot on the heels of when he reappeared in the comics again.
It's I'm not a huge Grant Morrison fan. His take on Batman, I mean, there's some stuff I really like. I can't say that I don't. There's some stuff it just doesn't hit me in the right spot as a fan. But his take on the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh, I thought was fantastic. Take really a silly, by 58 when that comic came out, Batman 113, right? I'm thinking back. Yeah. Batman had become full on sci-fi, crazy shit going on in the comics at that time. Crazy shit. And to take a premise of Batman going to another planet and meeting another Batman of this planet, take that and make it in the comics contemporary as kind of a fail-safe where I remember one of the lines was, this is what you get. This is Batman without Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
And we see this version of Batman in the current run of Batman. I mean, like right now.
Run.
Yes. So I always appreciate when when they use the Batman as Zur-En-Arrh. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great callback right now. If you're not reading Batman, there's some fun stuff going on. The episode was written by Adam Beechin, who not only has written tons of animated episodes for DC, but has also written DC Comics, and was directed by Michael Goguen. I apologize for butchering that. Diedrich Bader is our main Batman. Clancy Brown is Rotul. Corey Burton is Doc Magnus. Kevin Conroy, who's my favorite Batman animated, is the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh, in one of many appearances on this show as different important Bat people. Dana Delaney is Vilsey Valar. James Arnold Taylor's Green Arrow. And you have Hynden Walsh as Platinum and Mark Borden as Kanjar-Ro. So one of the things I liked about this series is the formula they adopted for it. And obviously, Bill, you know, I'm a big James Bond fan. I love Indiana Jones a lot as well. And like those film series, Brave and the Bold has a pre-title sequence that's usually not connected to the main adventure.
Yes. And they're also...
and that just kind of expands the show's ability to have all these different guest stars. So this time out, we've got Doc Magnus and his Metal Men doing some undercover sting operation with Kanjar-Ro.
I mean, it's just absurd. It's so absurd that it's good and awesome. You know, you got Batman as Matches Malone on a foreign planet of, this planet that's not Earth, along with Doc Magnus, who's in disguise as someone with a grill, which ends up being the Metal Man Gold, popping out of his mouth because he's his grill in his mouth. It's and to have it work, that's what why I love it so much. This absurd stuff works so well, and I love the opening sequences that have nothing to do with the main show, the main story of the show episode. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I mean, one of them we even get like Detective Chimp. Like, how often do you see Detective Chimp running around? So so that segues into their catchy theme song.
I should note, as a kid, I was a fan of Metal Man, the Metal Man, and I discovered them, ironically, in the old Batman Brave and the Bold comic books, because they would always had Batman team up with some other DC hero, and Metal Men showed up in a few issues, and I've always wanted I think they should do a Metal Man film. I think it would be great. They could do it. I don't know how you would go. I don't know if you would do it tongue in cheek. That's how a lot of times the Metal Man come off, or you do it, try to do something more serious with them. But yeah, anyway, I'm on a tangent. Let's get back to it. Yeah, that's my Metal Man tangent for the day. Yeah.
I got a tangent here. Did you read a lot of Brave and the Bold when you were younger?
I got a bunch of them from the 70s. Yeah. I did. Yeah. I remember, Metal Man stands out. Green Arrow was always would guest frequently in that title. It was always Batman.
Coincidentally.
Metamorpho, I remember. I think probably that's how I discovered Metamorpho, the Element Man. So yeah, I did. I got them all in the tote somewhere.
Volume 2 and 3 of the Legends of the Dark Knight. I think that's what it's called. Jim Aparo series, where that one focuses on like a specific artist. And most of those, at least for volume 2 and 3, is his time on Brave and the Bold. So I'm almost finished with volume 3, and that is a very different Batman than what I'm accustomed to.
Is it? It's 70s.
Oh yeah, it's really 70s.
Yeah.
But I mean, when I started collecting the main title, like religiously, was like 89. Coincidentally, who would have thought?
Yeah.
And so Aparo was my guy. And by then, Jason had just died. There was a very dark sensibility to the books, a little more realistic, maybe. I mean, for a comic book, but going to this 70s stuff to see that artwork, but there's just, it's very simplified and fantastic, kind of like this show. Like Batman and Aquaman are fighting about
clearly
they're fighting because the plot says they have to, because Aquaman's dad had done something maybe, and there was a boat, and you just get these weird adventures that you wouldn't see otherwise, and where Batman's kind of just accepted and goes around any time of the day or night, doing stuff, fighting serious crimes, but there's always this different edge to it.
This is post 1969, when they sent Robin off to school, off to college, and Batman went back to his dark and serious roots. So it's not campy like the 60s comics. It's just very much a product of its era, of its time. Because at the time they were quote unquote serious stories. We look at it today in the world after, The Dark Knight Returns and Year One. It's you hit it. It's a very different Batman. And it's like the series took that premise of Batman teaming up with people throughout the DC comic book universe, and then mixed in a little 60s TV series and a little bit of and some Silver Age Batman, and that's kind of what it's kind of an amalgamation of all of that,
which is something. And I didn't watch this series too much when it came out. We had been in Texas for maybe a year or two, and we'd never renewed our cable subscription. So at the time this was coming out on Cartoon Network, and it just, I don't know, I just wasn't in a place where I was, watching it, because we didn't have cable. So I would occasionally buy a few episodes on iTunes, this being one of them, because I knew Kevin Conroy was in it, and I knew it was Zur-En-Arrh. But this wound up being like Jack's show growing up for him, because then when they would come out on the DVD box set, we would get them for him, and he would watch these all the time. He had some action figures, he would play the video game. But one thing I appreciated was the different eras for characters. I mean, Batman is firmly rooted in like a 50s Dick Sprang aesthetic. But like the Green Arrow that we see in this episode, he is early Green Arrows before Neil Adams gave him even more of the pronounced Errol Flynn Robin Hood look. So you get like this weird mixture of like Golden Age and Silver Age, but then their Blue Beetle is the Jaime Reyes Blue Beetle. So you have like this modern sensibility as well, and it all comes together just really brilliantly. So in true like Brave and the Bold fashion, we start off with Green Arrow looking like his 50s version, and Batman in space.
In space, I wrote that down. Batman and Green Arrow in space, in all capitals.
In space, and it's totally fine. It's totally normal, and
chasing space pirates.
And back then, especially up until like Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil came on, like Green Arrow had a lot of similarities with Batman. He had a sidekick. Everything was Arrow this and Arrow that. He had an Arrow cave for some reason, because Batman did. He had an aeroplane, and he's in his aeroplane in space, which I guess it's an Arrow spaceship at this point. But they're having a fight, and like the missiles somehow launch tied in with their deflective shields, accidentally opens this wormhole, and it pulls Batman in, leaving Green Arrow to fight these pirates in space by himself. So Batman crash lands, which destroys his bat plane. And I love the design of the bat plane. It doesn't quite look like the 50s version, but it's got like these bold red accents that kind of make it feel like it would be part of like Adam West's
It does. And even
bat plane if he had
his There's a lot of that, look at the Batmobile. It's got the black and red look. Even his batarangs he throws are black and red. I mean,
they have that accent. Yeah.
I just clearly, Batman had in the 60s series, it was like a actual boomerang that looked like, with scallops like the bat, and it wasn't red, but having Batman have this black and red car and batarang, that's clearly, it's a nod to the 60s series for sure.
So wherever Batman winds up, he comments that it makes Gotham look like a playground. So he's clearly in the bad part of town, and he comes across a mugging where this guy is trying to rob a family.
Mm-hmm.
And of course he prevents it, but his strength, when he throws his batarang, it knocks down the wall behind everybody. And he has this great line.
I wrote it down. Yeah, it was hilarious.
It's like, what a sad planet, plagued by both crime and poor building codes. That is such an Adam West line. Like,
yes,
I can hear him saying it.
Just says it just so matter of fact, without any hint of, his voice any type of differentiation in the tone of his voice. Is just just matter of fact, and it's it's hilarious. And you don't roll your eyes at it. That's what's the great thing about this. You don't.
So that's when the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh shows up, and he uses his bat radio to disarm the mugger. Now, when the two Batmen meet, there's they mention like, oh, you must have been inspired by one of these too, and it's like this really weird looking red batish type creature, and he's like, oh, sure, so that's where we start to differentiate from the comic origin. The comic origin, the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh kind of beckons him somehow across space, and
doesn't
opens
he
up this...
use, I think it's been a while since I read that, I think he uses that bat radio to summon Batman
to kind of hone in, and he brings him in. He's like, hey, I need your help. I've been watching you with this super special telescope, and you've inspired my whole shtick here. Like, I've got a Batmobile like yours, I've got a Batplane like you, I've got a Batcave, and so everything he does is like influenced by Batman, which is really cool, because when we see it later in the show, like the Zur-En-Arrh Batplane and Batmobile are direct from the comic book itself, visually. But in this version, they just kind of follow the same trajectory, unaware of each other. And Batman mentions, obviously you've got, across all these worlds in the universe, obviously this would happen. You would have like a similar upbringing.
Yes. And they inject a lot of the Superman mythos into the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh, even though he's not a super powered person or hero. He's like Batman. He's, humanoid. That's, I think, what's the villain?
Rotool.
Yes. Rotool, who's like Lex Luthor, that version, and voiced by Clancy Brown on purpose. He even talks about at one point, what other planets would you find humanoids? So and
he goes through like Ran, Thanagar, Earth, and then Earth.
And we find out here shortly, Batman, our Batman, I should say, gets superpowers. I mean, almost like kind of the same reason that Superman had powers on Earth coming from Krypton. It's just that, and then you've got the reporter, who's voiced by Dana Delaney, who's a riff on Vicky Vale and Lois Lane, Bill C. Baylor, So I mean Vicky Vale, and then she works as a reporter at the what's the name of
the Solar Cycle Globe.
The Solar Cycle Globe, yes.
Yeah.
And so does Zur-En-Arrh, Batman's alter ego.
Now in the comic, let's see, oh my God, I'm forgetting his name right now. But in the comic, he's just a scientist. But the name for the Batman, the secret identity is the same. So I appreciated that they at least kept that, because a lot of the Tolano, that's his name. But a lot of the stuff, like there's a lot of Superman aspects in the original comic, like in terms of powers, and he does stuff. But like this episode, like takes it up a notch and goes even further with the comparisons. Like you pointed out with Vicky and with Luthor. But I mean, you've got Gothtropolis, so we're blending Gotham and Metropolis. Chancellor Gorzon,
yes.
There's Alpha. Well, that's more of a Batman thing. But even when we go later to the Solar Cycle to see Tolano as a reporter, like he's very Clark Kentish.
Yes.
When he shows up, he's really clumsy. He's got a million excuses. He pretends like he's jealous of Batman. Well, he doesn't really pretend, because he kind of is jealous of our Batman. But what I love about Conroy's performance in that scene is he takes more of the old animated series like Bruce Wayne voice and just dials it up just a little bit more in the register to make it,
his
sound
tone
different.
of his voice is higher, and and his voice, his voice as the Zur-En-Arrh Batman is like
very
straight
deep
on Batman, from Batman the Animated Series.
Yeah. So it's been, at that point, it had been a while since he had used more of that Bruce Wayne style voice, because he did it during the original 2 versions of the animated series. And when they made that switch to the WB and with the new Batman Superman adventures, he didn't really use it as much when he was Bruce Wayne, and the stories didn't really allow for it. And then after that was Batman Beyond. So when he was Bruce Wayne, which was most of the show, it was an older, gravelly Bruce Wayne, and he didn't have a reason to do that playboy affectation. So he was just kind of gruff and mean all the time.
Yeah.
So to go back to this lighter voice was really refreshing and a lot of fun. But after they have their introduction, and we see Rotul, and he shows up with a robot, and the robot kind of reminded me of a little bit of the Fleischer Superman robots, a little bit. But that's where Batman discovers that he's got superpowers. And so we get a few more Superman like homages where he gets shot and he's like, actually it tickles. And when I'm going to call her Lois, it's Vicky's character,
Bill C. Valar.
Bill C. Yeah. She says something to him, and he like, who are you? And he's like, just a friend. Like he's very Supermanish in this whole thing. And so
he had instead of heat vision, he has ice vision.
Right.
And he freezes one of the, robots. It's just, it's but great point about the robots looking like the Fleischer Superman stuff. I don't take anything for granted, or it's just a coincidence. That's got to be a nod to that as well.
Yeah, it's not one for one, but it definitely feels like something from that era. And then so they quickly retreat back to the Zur-En-Arrh Batcave, and we get to see the Zur-En-Arrh versions of the dinosaur, of the giant penny.
Yep.
And then he doesn't have an Alfred. He has Alpha Red.
Alpha Red, a robot.
A robot that raised him from a child.
That's what he said. He raised him from a child. Yes.
Yeah. So they do a whole bunch of tests in the Batcave, and they find out that it's Rodon in the atmosphere gives Batman his abilities. And so then quickly, Zur-En-Arrh, he's got to go to work as Tolano. And while he's doing his, civilian job, Brave and the Bold Batman goes out into Gothtropolis.
Yes, he says he's going to take his powers out for a spin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they just double down more on the whole Superman aspect. The civilians that are looking up, they're like, look up in the sky, it's a Zeta bird, an air car, it's Batman. And the music is really Superman-ish as he's doing all his heroic saves. And he even fights like this giant green monster. At the end of it, he like stands on like a building or something with, with his hands, his fists, on his waist. And he's like, truth, justice, and the Zur-En-Arrh way. And it's just a lot of fun. Like they really play it up.
They have their version of kryptonite. What you mentioned, Rotul discovers a compound or element that will take the powers away, and it ends up being quartz, which is an earth product. So yes, I thought it's just very. I loved how with this series that they take, and it's not always just the main part of the episode. It's a lot of times they did it with the pre-credits cold opening, and they would take a story, a premise from one of the classic comics, and then kind of do their own. They adapt it and turn it into their own thing. They did this main story of this episode is an example of that with Batman 113, the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh. But you saw, you've seen the Rainbow Batman before, where the whole purpose was changed. They took the premise from the comic and they inserted it into the episode to make it even more. It's different, but it's still very much a nod to, those Silver Age comics. I love when they did that kind of stuff.
And, not to be forgotten, they give us like a quick scene of Green Arrow, who's still out in space. And he's still fighting and complaining how, Batman left him alone to deal with all that. And then we go back to Zur-En-Arrh then. And by that point, Batman has stopped, 37 crimes in progress. And like you mentioned, Luthor breaks out after he figures out what gave our Batman his powers. So you see he's got new robots now and to attack Batman, and these robots are straight up from the comic book from 113, because in the comic version of it, it's not an accident. Zur-En-Arrh brings Brave Batman over for a purpose because they're being invaded by aliens.
Yeah.
And only Batman with his superpowers can stop them. So Luthor, because we're doing more of a Superman thing, he has remote controlled, but these robots look exactly like the ones from the comic. They just don't have aliens sitting in the bubble where the head should be. So Rotul blasts Batman with a quartz ray, which basically takes him out of the game. And that's when Zur-En-Arrh comes back in for the win. And we haven't talked about it much. I really love the contrast between the two Batman visually, because yellow and red and purple isn't exactly what we would picture as like Batman colors, but it really makes him pop against the blue and gray Batman. And I like how Zur-En-Arrh's got the longer ears.
Yeah, I was about to say the cowl is a little different. Looks different than the Batman, our Batman, Brave and the Bold Batman's costume. So yeah, it was. And I'm glad that they got not only Conroy just for nostalgia and Batman history purposes and all that to voice this version of Batman, but I'm glad it's someone other than just if Diedrich Bader did both voices,
Did both of them,
and they sounded the same. So it's great to hear not only the nod to, to hear Kevin Conroy talking as Batman again, but just both versions of Batman having a different voice.
Well, yeah, it's great, from that perspective, because you have that contrast, but then it's, for fans, like, it's a great, or older fans, it's a nice homage having the Superman the animated series, Luthor and Lois come back.
Yeah.
And even further, like, if you want to go further, like, meta with it, I mean, I love Mask of the Phantasm. That's one of my favorite Batman movies ever, live action or animated. And the voice of Vilsey is the same as Andrea from Mask of the Phantasm, like Batman's first love. So Dana Delaney. So hearing
she did Lois. Yeah, she did Lois
being infatuated with Kevin Conroy's Batman again. Like, it's a nice, little callback.
She was Lois in the Superman animated series, and she was Andrea Beaumont in Phantasm. Yeah.
I almost said Andrea Romano, but that's the voice director.
Yeah.
But I mean, they have a great chemistry together, and she's just a phenomenal voice actress. I mean, she's a phenomenal actress, but she does really well with animation and getting the tone that they're going for, because her performance is Lois-like, but it's a Lois of a different era. Like, the way the dialogue is, it's very much steeped in like a 50s kind of sensibility.
Yes. I agree.
And it just sounds like she's having fun, voicing the character in that way. But Zur-En-Arrh comes to help Brave and the Bold, and he whips out this can from his utility belt and sprays him with a protective coating to shield him from Rodon exposure. And it's labeled with a bat. It doesn't have like Zur-En-Arrh Rodon spray or anything, but it feels very Adam Westy. Like, he randomly has a can of this, in his utility belt.
So he gains his strength. Well, he's not weak anymore, but he doesn't have the super strength anymore. So he's just back to regular, our Batman, regular Batman, no superpowers.
Yeah. So they quickly team up and defeat Rotool, and Batman makes a speech about, not relying on powers and how it's kind of a relief to not have them anymore, which that feels very Batman.
Yeah.
He would just, be happy with all the training that he himself has put in and earned, and not, granted mystically.
And it made it funnier for me than, when all of a sudden Green Arrow pops in through a wormhole, and then he's got the powers, and then the Zur-En-Arrh Batman sprays him, and he falls to the ground, and it was kind of funny, because Green Arrow this episode was always, I mean, he was a fun character. He wasn't a goofy, silly character, but he was kind of comic relief a lot of times. And that was
for this show
fine. Yeah.
And it took me a second to kind of retrain my brain, because I watched 8 years of Arrow, the TV show, which was basically them kind of Batmaning Green Arrow a little bit. And he's very gruff and serious. So it was fun to go back to a more playful Green Arrow, and
very much
just having fun flying around and getting to be super for a hot minute.
Yeah, this was very much the 50s and 60s Green Arrow, and the way he's portrayed in Brave and the Bold is he admires Batman, a lot, and comes off of being younger than Batman, so to speak. So yeah, I always like when he shows up in the series.
And he like, I'd say he and Aquaman probably show up some of the at least to my memory. Like, he and Aquaman have quite a few appearances in the show.
At first, it was going to be, I think the original concept would be more like the Blue Beetle would show up, would be like the most, and then it kind of morphed into Green Arrow, and then of course the Aquaman episodes are classic. So And so, yeah, I agree. I think would say Green Arrow and Aquaman the most for that.
And it just makes sense too, given where Green Arrow was in the first 30 years of his creation, where he kind of was the only thing that differentiated him from Batman was his shtick. You know, back then when the characters were more known by their powers and not their personality. To my recollection, that's kind of what DC was at a certain point. Like everyone kind of had their powers and they didn't really delve too deeply. I mean, that was just comics in general. Like they didn't delve too much in their personal lives or gave them much of a personality. Like that stuff came later, especially once Stan Lee started doing it with Marvel, and then DC started to catch up with Green Lantern, Green Arrow by Denny and so on.
For sure. And then it just ends, time to go home, Batman says.
Yeah.
You know? And
because Green Arrow figured out how to open up the wormhole on his own, and he still has his aeroplane, so they jump in and they fly off, and that's it.
Yeah. And you get that great theme song with the credits. It's one of the best. It may be my favorite. It's just the theme song for Brave and the Bold is great.
Yeah, it definitely has its own unique style and swing to it.
Yes. Yep.
It's got a swagger, and it's not Adam Westish. It's its own thing. Like I think people kind of tend to lump it in with that because it kind of evokes like a 50s, 60s era, but it's very unique, and it's not, and it had to be. If you look at what happened, like Batman the Animated Series was very much inspired by like what Tim Burton and Danny Elfman had done visually and sonically. And then so we had the Batman next, which kind of took more of a rock edge to the theme. I mean, Bono and the Edge did the theme, like from U2 did the music. So like you have to pivot away from that and do something unique and not just bring the same old. So I really enjoyed the theme for that song, or for that show. In closing up, do you have a favorite line or scene from the episode?
I think probably just the at the beginning when our Batman meets Zur-En-Arrh Batman, and it's just like, and you mentioned before, like Batman says, yes, with so many planets and universes, this is just, it was bound to happen at some point. He doesn't even blink an eye, and they, so I like that for going back to the Batcave at the beginning and the Alpha Red and all that. Yeah, it's just it's just not blinking an eye at the outrageousness of the whole thing. It's very much what this series is all about.
For me, it's the what a sad planet plagued by both crime and poor building codes line.
Yes, that's a great line. Yes, it's for a line. Yes, scene. I got stay with what I said, but for a line.
He says it so straight, and you can tell he really believes. He's not playing it to be jokey or campy. Like his Batman really believes that. It's amazing. So wrapping things up here, what grade would you give this episode?
Okay, I will do that in. I would do it in complete, in the relation just to the show itself, not based on anything outside the show compared to other episodes in the show itself. That's been my criteria. For the series, it's a solid A. It's a solid A episode.
Yeah, I can't find anything, any flaws to it. I mean, to me, it's got to be like an A or an A plus. And it's something you've got to keep in mind, like what the intent is and what the tone of it is. If you're looking for a dark, serious, grounded Batman, you're going to be really disappointed with this episode. But I mean, this is what they set out to do, and they did it masterfully. I mean, from the visuals to the cast, the score, I mean, everything just clicks in this episode. And yeah, it's ridiculous, but that's
what it is. That's what it's
supposed
to
is.
Be. Yeah, it knows what it is, and it's not ashamed of what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and they took a good premise, like they took a fun comic and they improved on it.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion. And it helps that, when that comic came out in the 50s, things hadn't been built up like how we understand Batman, how we understand Superman, the various iterations of animated things that have come down the road since then. Like, they didn't exist. So, Beechin really took all those different elements that have existed and blended them into like a modern version of that. And it just made it, better.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have much else to add except that it's I'd look at this show, this series, this episode, and the entire series as it's all relative to itself. I'm not comparing it. I'm not going to compare it to Batman the Animated Series or the Batman or Beware the Batman or anything that came before, because it's not fair. And you're right. I think there's a period that this show wouldn't have worked in Batman history. This wouldn't have worked probably in the early 2000s. This probably wouldn't have worked in the 90s at the same time Batman the Animated Series came out, because Batman in the last 30 years is probably, I think he's grown more than he ever has. The fact that he has gotten to be so malleable, and different versions can coexist with each other, and the 60s show had it has and is still having, to a certain degree, its renaissance. You can't say that about a lot of characters, comic book characters. No. That can have so many different versions that work, and that's just, I think it's a lot to do with Batman's popularity over the last 30 years, which is probably unprecedented in the 50 years that came, 50 plus years that came before this last stretch,
So I'm sure this isn't going to be the last time we talk about this show. There's a lot of really good episodes that delve into all different eras of Batman in this show. So for some reason, if there's someone out there and this is their first podcast listening to Batmanimation or Batman on Film, where can they find you if they want to hear and learn more about Bill Ramey?
Oh, just go to Batman on Film, the website, batman-on-film.com, and you can find, it's me. I've done it for almost 25 years, so you can find any social media link there, but just throw one of them out, at Batman on Film on Twitter. So that's really all I got.
And I am at Javi True on Twitter, and I've got reviews on Batman on Film, talking Robin, Batman, Catwoman. So yeah, you can find us there. Just anything Batman on Film YouTube channel. And that is going to conclude it for our second episode of Batmanimation. Who knows what topic we're going to cover next on the show? Everything is open.
Everything that's animated Batman is open, film and TV series. So there's a lot to delve into here. There's a
Batcave full of episodes and animated movies. So I'm super excited for the show and to see what we talk about next, because it's all good, it's all interesting. So
well, I enjoyed talking this episode with you, and we're gonna, like you said, we'll get back to Brave and the Bold. There's no doubt about it. I already got some episodes that I want to discuss. So I won't mention them right now, but maybe I'll mention a couple of them. Music Meister.
Oh my God.
Legends of the Dark Might. Let's see what else. Chill of the Night. Okay, it's about as
Chill of the Night is like...
That's pretty dark for this. Yeah, pretty dark. Pretty dark. I reckon, got a lot more in common with Batman the Animated Series than most of the other Batman Brave and the Bold episodes.
Yeah, that's like an all hands on deck episode.
Mm-hmm.
That one's pretty important.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, we'll let announcer Rachel take us out, but I am your host for this episode, Javi, and this is Bill, Jett, Ramey for Batman on Film.
Thanks for listening to Batmanimation, a BatmanOnFilm.com podcast revisiting the animated TV and film adventures of the Caped Crusader. Follow Batmanimation on Twitter @Batmanimation. Follow BOF on Twitter @The Batman on Film. Follow Jett on Twitter @Batman on Film. For Jett and Team BOF, I'm announcer Rachel. Batman on Film, authoritative, definitive, the original, established in 1998.
What a sad planet, plagued by both crime and poor building codes.